Dr. Wiedenfeld here to talk about American entertainment since 1980. This is really a model that was set in the 70s, and so we're going to be looking at, how it was built upon since then. I'm going to talk about the first sort of the business side, then get into some of the technological changes, and then the genres at the end. So, if we go back to the classic Hollywood, this is usually what's called classic Hollywood. Business wise, there were five big studios. The big five, there were the three minor ones of, it was Universal and Columbia, and I forget the other. I forget the third. They were making movies. They were in the movie business. They're vertically integrated. So they own theaters, did distribution, mostly their own movies, but some other ones, and they also did production at their own studios there. So we saw that changed later, and television came along as a rival. Well, what's happened since then is that basically all of those old movie companies got bought. They merged with other companies. They merged with television companies. And now they are just one part of bigger media conglomerates. Or bigger conglomerates, mostly that ones that have focus on media, but not necessarily so. So, Paramount merged with Viacom, which was big in cable. So Viacom was big in cable TV, and then they bought CBS, which was the biggest television network, and Paramount movies and other channels. So they're focused on media here. MGM, eventually gets bought by Amazon. I think in the 2020s. Amazon's not a movie company, but they. You think of Amazon as maybe a place where you buy things, but they're really an internet company. They're focused on their website of internet sales. And that's distribution. They're distributing products to people. And one product that they distribute, that they decided, well, as long as we're distributing, books it was originally, which is the kind of media, as long as we're selling books to everyone, and then other kinds of goods, why don't we sell them media as well? And they start, streaming video, producing their own TVs. And so as long as they're going down that road, it's just natural. The way that free market capitalism works is there is advantages to being a monopoly that controls everything. And so if you have a lot of capital like Amazon does, yeah, you're going to buy some other big movie company, and you'll have a whole library of old MGM movies that now you can offer to your customers, and try and get subscription money through Prime. You all know all this, but just to understand that there's maybe six big media companies out here, that movies are just one part of them. So Sony Pictures, they're Columbia. That was used to be a minor studio. RKO is gone, but Universal was another minor who became big with Comcast there, and Disney was actually originally. RKO distributed Disney, but then Disney, they own Marvel, and which is not a studio so much as a production studio, so much as a intellectual property. They got 20th Century, 20th Century Fox absorbed. Part of it stayed. Fox is now minor, but most of it went to Disney and so forth. So Netflix and Fox would be kind of your smaller companies that are not in the big six here, but obviously important. And other indies like A24 is a big it's an independent distributor, but it's not anywhere on the level of these major multinational corporations. And bigger corporations, they're into big movies. They're into movies because they can make money with them, first off. And they're not just making money on the movies, as we saw, but through all different aspects of ancillary revenue. And so this is, one of the reasons that they're interested in blockbuster and franchises is because the big company like Disney is going to own not just movies, but they also have TV stations and theme parks and stores and merchandise and all of this stuff, and franchises with which have called tent poles, that are the blockbuster films that hold up that big tent of entertainment around which everybody is going to come and spend their money for fun. Is So that's the one business side of that. And then the other thing is that there's tremendous risk with blockbuster films in all the projects here. What if people don't like it? So one way to mitigate that risk is by using familiar characters who have already sold. This is the intellectual property thing. And so the big studios are just going to produce 3 to 6 blockbusters per year and hope that one of them hits and becomes a $billion global revenue phenomenon. Now, the other big change you'll remember that happened in the 50s, I think it was 48, the Paramount decision, anti-monopoly decision, the studios had to sell their theaters. Well, since then there are major exhibition circuits that kind of become conglomerates on their own, still separate from the distributors here. And there's a couple of the big ones in North America. Now, one of the, they're big business, but they are it's the distributors who really hold all the cards. They've got the product. If AMC doesn't like the terms that they're getting from the big six, what are they going to do? Who are they going to get movies from? Try and get movies from somewhere abroad, or people are going to come see Chinese movies? Maybe. But there's a risk. Big risk is involved in it for them as well, because you have these big multiplex theaters. So generally, they say that like 30% of your ticket revenue, 30% is going to the distributor. But the theater doesn't get to keep 70, because it's going to have to pay another 30% to the distributor to reimburse them for all the marketing costs. So distributors great here. It's spending millions and millions of dollars on advertisements, on streaming and on television and print and everything. And they're not paying for it. They're going to make the theaters pay for it. So it's a great deal. And this is so the marketing expenses are huge because of we saw the wide release strategy that. The exploitation people started, and then Jaws picks up. You want to open a movie simultaneously all across the globe, or if not the nation. So you have to spend a lot more in marketing in advertising to get people to come all at once. You can't let this kind of slow burn word of mouth go out from the big cities and then everybody follows. No, like you have to pay to get onto the media companies, and you see why it's good for them to own television and streaming, because they can just get the word out and push that content to everyone at once. Multiplex. Here's the United Artists 6 in Arizona, which was a big multiplex at the time. 1974, but the same concept applies. So you'll see that one of the advantages of the multiplex is that you have different audiences. You might have the family audience you see there in the #1 theater for Alice in Wonderland, big Disney movie, family audience. Then you have, here you see the importance of new wave cinema. You have a French director. Truffaut's movie is in theater 2. Theater 3, Al Pacino's in Serpico, which is a kind of artsy crime film. So you have a romance, art, people who are on a date, they're going into theater 2. Guys' night out, they're going to see Serpico. Or maybe there's a war film there, a Papillion in the next theater, and so forth. the thing that's happening at the same time with these varied audiences is that there was a production code up until 1968. Don't know if I mentioned this before. Everything was basically rated G until 1968, and then there's a new rating system that had 4 different levels: G, mature, which became PG, R, and X. X, which then became like NC-17 or whatever. So you had those 4 levels. And the kind of content they would allow. The Blockbuster, they wanted to have something a little bit spicier, a little bit naughtier language and more sex and violence than it would allow in the PG, but not quite. They didn't want to be R because they wanted to have families come to it, and especially young kids. Well, teenagers are the key for marketing in the movies. These are the people who are going out to the movies who have money to spend. They have free time and money to spend. They're the center for blockbusters, is teenagers. And, they're especially interested in sex and violence that they probably don't get to see on the TV at home. So PG-13 is, Spielberg proposes it, and after some controversy over Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984. And it becomes kind of, since then it was basically the standard blockbuster rating because for all the reasons that I mentioned. Megaplex. So this is even bigger than the multiplex. Here's the Cineplex 18, which gets built in Toronto in the late 90s, and it's like the multiplex, but here we are selling. If a movie is successful, you can put it on multiple screens. If it's not, then you can pull it off. So it offers some flexibility to the exhibitors, and you'll see if you look closely, it advertises the staggered start time, so you're not going to have lines. And the other thing that's happening with theaters here is that they're offering premium audio video and amenities like the stadium seating and the luxury seats that come like the what do they call them, the reclining seats. This is a big thing in the 2000s. Is the big sound, digital sound comes around. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, fewer people are going to the movies, or they're only going for a couple big events. There are too many multiplexes, too many screens in the U.S. So one thing that they try and do is to up the ticket price. You can offer nicer seats, IMAX, serving food, those sorts of things that exhibitors are trying to do to make up the difference. So last thing I want to say about finish this section about the business side is that the distributors here, these companies, they're really into finance. This is like a financial project for them, money-making projects on a very high level. And they're working with artists who are submitting projects, and they're working with agents who are putting talent packages together. And they're trying to figure out how to get all kinds of, are there loans? Are there tax incentives? Are there subsidies? Well, what should we go film in Australia? What if we go and film it in this country? And what, if we have actors from this country, then they'll give us some kind of subsidy for that. So, it'll be cheaper if we film it in Toronto or in Vancouver. It's at the scale of how expensive it is. It's a huge financial project that they're doing that movie making becomes for the big movies and ancillary revenue. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the technological changes that happened during the time. Cable television, I mentioned Viacom. It appears in 1975, and the cable channels want content, and movies especially. So movies were already on TV, on network television, like almost every, once one channel would be showing a movie every night of the week, the Sunday night movie on NBC or whatever. Well, cable companies, they pick up on that, and they're going to show movies all the time, all day, and they're going to show, R-rated movies. So HBO home, which stands for home box office, so you get the idea, home movies at home. And then you have Ted Turner, who he has TBS and Turner Classic Movies. He acquires MGM in 1986. MGM is later going to move to Amazon, so kind of complicated there. But he's getting content for cable. At the same time, you have video cassettes hitting the scene. Now, I would say cable has inroads first, because it wasn't as expensive. Home video, not until the 80s, 1980s does everyone have home video. And partly also movie theaters were afraid of people not going out to the movies if they're just going to watch cassettes at home. In the end, of course, they're going to make tons more money by selling cassettes to people and rentals through like Blockbuster's the name of the biggest movie rental business. But so there's going to be some theaters like the third run theaters that are going to decline as home video comes up upon this here. But maybe they're going to make more money than they would selling to just network TV back in the day. More ways of seeing movies is going to multiply, and look at the advertisement here for this JVC unit. JVC presents the 8:00 movie at 2:36 a.m. Whoa, sexy time! Look at the it's a couple on the couch having a glass of wine. What kind of movie are they watching on there? Ooh, it looks pretty sexy. Okay, DVD. Next thing in the next iteration of this becomes affordable in the 2000s. Better piracy protection than video cassettes. People with videotapes, you could get blank videotapes and you could just record movies off the TV, and they could be dubbed and stuff. DVDs were cheaper, and they had the region codes. They had encryption. Netflix first gets its start by you could get like. But originally, I think it was, or for a time, it was unlimited DVDs by mail. Like you get a DVD, you watch it, then you put it back in the mail, and they send you another one. That's how it worked. I love this ad here for Pioneer, which is it's a take on a Maxwell stereo ad. But traveling through space becomes more real. Chasing convicts becomes more real. Here, it's for your home theater. Girlfriend's feeling of neglect becomes more real. You can see her shadow in the. So this is, I don't know if this was in like a men's magazine but look at this sexy ad here, and on this one, like this is really pointing to pornography. It isn't saying it out loud, but it's just saying like, look, you don't need to go to a porn theater now. You can like get porn in your home theater. And that's a big part of the industry that doesn't get talked about a lot because it's all private, and it's specifically something that people don't talk about, but it's real, and you see it in these advertisements here. Okay, digital television, last big technological thing I want to talk about. 2009 let's talk about, because big thing is digital television. Like the broadcast networks, all the standards change to digital. HD TV, high definition television, flat screen becomes the standard. Widescreen becomes the standard. And so that it's tied in with people watching things on DVD. They fit perfectly together. And at the same moment, it will be tied in with smart TVs and streaming, so that this is about the time when Netflix, Hulu, other companies they start to launch streaming services So you can, it's kind of a different form of cable, except that instead of the cable operator choosing, what the schedule is for what you're going to see, you get to choose off the menu um, whatever you want, and becomes, obviously a major, as the internet expands and fast internet expands, becomes a major gateway for home movies. And there's again a fear that people are going to stop going to the movies, and I wouldn't say there's an increase, especially COVID-19 really hurt movie going, but the 2020s you still have movie theaters. Same model is there. The theatrical windows are shorter before it goes to streaming and home video, but it's still the same paradigm from the 70s is there. There's a harmonizing harmony between all of these different media companies, and the movies are kind of the tent pole, the premium kind of content, along with television shows and comic books and video games. The big event that's marketed around is usually movies. Now, video games are challenging the industry wide in another way, but I would say that movies still, it's kind of cultural prestige and importance, are still number one. Okay, now I've been talking a lot about blockbusters, but as I go through the genres here, some of these are blockbusters, but that's not it. These are distributors, so they're not just producing big movies. They're producing some, like 3 to 6 big movies, but they're also distributing a full menu of stuff to everyone. We saw the menu at the old multiplex. The menu now on streaming is that there's all kinds of movies, whatever you want to see. And each one of these distributors is going to be either producing some medium and small budget stuff, or they're probably, especially for the small budget, they're just going to be buying it. They go to big festivals like South by Southwest, like Toronto Film Festival, Sundance. They see or even Cannes, Venice. They see what small movies are successful. Maybe we're gonna go on an award run, and they say, okay, we're gonna, we'll have our specialty division, Sony Pictures Classics. You go to those festivals, find a good movie, and then we'll distribute it. If it's successful, we'll be able to place it everywhere and make all kinds of money. So that's the model that happens with a movie like Sex, Lies, and Videotape. You see it won a Best Picture at Cannes. I can't remember if I think it was successful at Sundance too. It's about home movie making itself, and sex, to come back to this this aspect of home movies. So this is an adult movie, but it's also a good example of indie as genre. So it's independent maybe in terms of its production, but when you get into distribution, you can be an independent production, but if you distribute it worldwide, here they're through Miramax, or you distribute through one of the divisions of a big 6 media company, you aren't exactly a garage band anymore. So so some of the new wave traditions they flourish in American independent movie making. If blockbuster movies get less artsy and interesting, indie maybe more. And there's a lot of creative storytelling, focus on characters rather than on necessarily the plot. There's both, if you want to make it big with a big indie movie so that you can then get hired by one of the majors for bigger projects, or if you are in those bigger projects, then you might go do an indie project on the side, which is important for your artistic just life and credibility. And it's the festival circuit is where this is happening, and the universities are tied into the festival circuit on a certain small level here, and trying to funnel into the industry that way. Another kind of, you could call it a genre, that they talked about crossover in the 80s. There, especially crossover between different racial and ethnic groups. So here, if you're Columbia Pictures, you see in Boys in the Hood a crossover that's not only going to appeal to black audiences, but also all of the white audiences, young white suburban kids, and and other and obviously the suburban black kids and Asian kids that are and Latino kids that are listening to rap and hip hop, which really becomes a huge thing in the 90s. So Boys in the Hood is tied in with that through Ice Cube, who stars and is a musician, star musician himself. But Cuba Gooding Jr. becomes a big Hollywood star in the 90s. Obviously not as big as Denzel. Denzel Washington is like the big black actor star of this era. The 90s, there's all kinds of crossover diversity, and not because there was some sort of government incentive that said, oh, you should have more black people in movies. Like, no, they just want to make money, and they're find that you have like diverse, creative, talented products out there. Like, people want to see them, and it's goes back to tradition of black independent cinema, which is happening in the late 60s and 70s with Van Peebles. In the 80s, it's Spike Lee is a key figure, and the success of kind of black indie film then translates to the studios saying, okay, we should make some like medium budget movies with black talent. And it's so there was sort of an anti-diversity trend in the 80s that gets reversed here by the 90s, and there's a lot more diversity in content, race, but also women's pictures, queer pictures, everything. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is animation. Toy Story here. It comes out of Pixar, which was its own smaller animation company that then will merge with Disney, which is just the logic of distribution, monopolies, capitalism, natural for that to happen. John Lasseter. This movie stands out for being the first computer-generated feature. To go back to a little bit of those technological changes. Slowly, we're getting more and more digital technology since the 70s, since, Star Wars is using computers for controlling its models. And, by the 90s here, with animation is probably the first to go fully digital. There's a youth audience with animation, of course. And as Hollywood is looking for a global audience, animation is really good because you can just dub in voices for all over the globe. So animation travels really well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about comedy. Comedies tend to be more medium or small budget. And Clueless here is a great 90s movie set in a high school. Fast Times at Ridgemont High is an 80s high school movie that really revives, starts a trend. But revived here Amy Heckerling, and I read she went to Beverly Hills High School and was kind of observing people. Her script that I think she wrote is based on Jane Austen's Emma. Distant background in the same way that a lot of movies are kind of reworking Shakespeare in a kind of lighter comic way, and you see these like cell phones are on the scene here. So this was like a joke scene in the movie where these very rich Beverly Hills girls, you had to be very rich to afford a cell phone in 1995, are walking around, and then they realize they're talking to each other, and they realize they're walking right next to each other, and they just hang up. So, this is not an indie movie. This would have been, a movie. It's set in Beverly Hills. It's made in L.A. I think, they traveled around to get to Paramount, who owned MTV and Nickelodeon. So it makes sense for their kind of target audience, that let's greenlight this movie and we'll see what we can do with it. It's comedy. Now I don't know what to call this one. Comic book content. We're talking about action genre, crime genre. It's all kind of mixed in. Superhero genre. It's all sort of mixed in here. It really takes off in the 2000s, but there were a couple of big important efforts in the 90s here. Tim Burton brought a real, kind of his comic storybook sensibility to Batman Returns. It's not realistic Batman at all. Michael Keaton is known as comedian. And technologically, this movie is important because there was the debut of digital sound. So theaters having digital sound, so you could have surround sound, like 5 channels at the time, plus a subwoofer. There's this premium experience of the theaters, which they've been offering this since the 50s and continually leveling up. The next leveling up happens again around 2009 with Avatar, directed by James Cameron. I meant to put that on here. He's he's making this movie in 3D, which is a huge trend in the 2009, early 2010s for 3D, because you could they had a new 3D technology, new kinds of glasses that worked well, and you could charge extra ticket money for it. And here we have, live action and animation are totally merged in this kind of production, 3D production. The theaters are all going to change over to digital projectors. They had digital sound before, but were celluloid. Digital projectors, and the movie's coming on a hard drive called DCP. Horror is, again, target audience. Horror is really important. But, the nature of horror as a genre is that it's one of the, it offers the most artistic license to the filmmakers, because you can kind of do anything in horror, story-wise, like lots of things out of left field, that, because it's horror, you're sort of allowed to do it within this fantasy space. And technique-wise, that also permits a lot of it could be wild or just creative techniques, focus on vision and sound and the sensation. So all these stylistic aspects are really important in horror. What sets something apart, though, is, now in horror is still the script. It's the auteur aspect here that's probably best represented by Get Out, Jordan Peele movie from 2017, and kind of a twist on the scenario of going to the parents' house over the weekend. But there's a racial element of the black boyfriend going to this like upper class white family, and all of the meanings that are tied in with that. Lastly, I want to mention that so everything converts to digital, but celluloid doesn't die. And there was a deal in the 2010s that that's some studios led by some of their big director producers like Quentin Tarantino we see here, J.J. Abrams and Christopher Nolan. They wanted to keep film alive because it has a special look that you just can't replicate in digital. Just different kinds of looks that are possible. And so, one of the examples is The Hateful Eight, is Quentin Tarantino movie. And he screened it like the, roadshow style, where, select cities would have these 70 millimeter Prince, and which I was fortunate to see. It looked great. Maybe not my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, but it has this, like, he's all into the retro 70s 1970s style, and he's still able to do it today, here as a big kind of a major auteur. Major auteur, but this is still like a medium budget movie. So that's American entertainment since 1980. As I said, it's sort of like the business and general paradigm that was set in the 70s, but it's moving toward digital and bigger media companies. But movies still remain this kind of tentpole center of popular culture and the most prestigious aspect of popular culture around.